Modern day beatitude, blessed are the youth, for they shall inherit the national debt burden. If you think this country is overwhelmed by debt, I'm about to terrorize you the more. This country needs 634 billion shillings in debt between now and June for 5 months. Otherwise, this country is going to cave in on itself. This debt could come from multilateral lenders like the IMF and World Bank, or it could come from bilateral lenders like China. Whichever way you look at it, it is debt. The conversation around debt in this country is so commonplace that we have allowed pedestrian arguments to dictate what we know and learn about debt on a day-to-day basis. Now, what that robs us as Kenyans of is a chance to see debt outside of the picture that the government continuously paints. Now, debt could be, of course, an ingredient for recession, especially unsustainable debt. An ingredient for recession, it could lead to inflation, but most of all, we need to start seeing debt as a tool of the oppressor. How did we get there though? Let's backtrack a little bit. Kenya has been on a borrowing spree since the year 2013, and while that sounds like a very political statement, I can qualify it. The current systems of power inherited a debt burden of 1.8 trillion shillings. Currently, the debt burden is about to hit 7 trillion shillings, which marks a 300% increase in the amount of debt that we have. How even? Two things. Since the year 2013, we have taken 9 syndicated loans as compared to the year 2012 backwards to 2002, where we only took 1. Now, the thing about syndicated loans is that, number one, they're very expensive. Number two, they're very short term. And worst of all, they're dollar-dominated loans. What that means is that you will always have an extra expense over and above what you took to repay the interest on those loans. Currently, the shilling is falling against the dollar, so that can tell you, if you think it was expensive to pay interest on those loans, it is about to hit the roof. Syndicated loans are so bad that developing countries are continuously turning down offers of financing their budget deficits by syndicated loans. Why we have 9 is absolutely beyond me. Second thing, the SGR loan. It has to be the single most expensive loan we ever took to finance a single infrastructural project since independence. What are the peculiarities of the SGR loan? Number one, the interest rates. The SGR loan interest rate is 3.34%. That sounds very marginal, but a quick fact check would tell you that the current acceptable world rate is 0.34%. We are paying 3% higher than the acceptable world benchmark. Even if we were to have borrowed from the IMF, which of course campaigns or champions for sustainable debt, we would have borrowed at a rate of 2.3%. We are still paying 1% higher than what the IMF would have lent us that money at. Why in the Lord's name did we take on this debt? And second, why are we allowing the same bilateral lender to continuously lend us money at obnoxious interest rates? As borrowers, we're either very stupid or very informed. I'm choosing to believe very informed. What is the situation playing out in this country currently? We are undergoing the first recession since 2002. You have a very bold presidency that will come and tell you that we are losing 2 billion shillings to corruption. And third, we are looking at a presidency and we're looking at a country that is actively seeking out debt relief measures, including debt cancellation in its entirety. If you think it's bold of us to think that we're going to finance a budget deficit of 823 billion shillings on debt, it's even bolder for a lender, considering the circumstances playing out in our country, to think they would actually lend us almost 1 trillion shillings in debt. What is the bigger play here? African countries have continuously denied, and especially African governments, the role of debt in reducing African sovereignties to flag independence. It was predicted by the Nkurumas who fought for independence. It was predicted by the Mandelas that the white man would come back, and when he did, he was going to come back in a smarter way than we ever anticipated. And look at that now. As a government, we have continuously denied that if we were to default on payment of the SGR loan, we would give up the port of Mombasa. We are not privy to exactly what was signed in those contracts, but we can very easily extrapolate to what we have seen happening to other countries. A case in point would be Sri Lanka. They defaulted on a loan to China, and in return, they had to give up one of the most strategic ports and 15,000 acres of land around the port for 99 years. Yeah? So that can very easily paint a picture for you of what to expect in the instance that we default on loans. And besides, did we suddenly realize that we need an inland port? Why the rush if we're not looking to give up the one at the port? We don't need to know exactly what governments agree. All we need to hear is that Africa trades with bilateral lenders on the same platform. Fine. Let us look at how bilateral lenders have treated other countries before. Equatorial Guinea, for example, 80% of its budget is financed by debt, and a whole 80% still goes to large infrastructural projects. A key thing for neocolonialists. Because what that means is that Equatorial Guinea only spends at least 2 to 3% on healthcare and education. Remember, this is an African country. This is a developing country. Human resource is one of the most key resources. An investment in its people through health and education is an investment inevitably in its future. A compromise of these two things is a compromise of the sovereignty of these people, because in future, what you do is put them in a consistent dependency of debt, which is the neo-colonialist mindset. It is to ensure that your tax base never grows enough to cover you, and to ensure that you will continuously borrow from them, because it is a chain that has to be sustained. That's how neo-colonialism works. And if you think that it hasn't hit home, look at Nigeria, look at South Africa, look at Kenya. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and our doctors went on strike because we could not afford to pay them, and we're still chasing infrastructural projects like the expressway. Does it make sense to you? Article 5.5 of the SGR contract, neither the borrower Kenya nor any of its assets is going to be subject to immunity both locally and abroad. Number one, the big man always comes to collect. And number two, when he comes to collect, it is my goose and yours that will be cooked. You see, the thing we didn't know is that we were given up a very long time ago. We were traded for the next available penny and hoodwinked as a people and as a history. Back in the day, you called them collaborators. Nowadays, I prefer to call them politicians, and collectively you call them a government. When the big man comes to collect, it is you and me that will be offered up on a plate. Your politicians will find protection in the process of corruption. It is the 2 billion that they steal on a daily basis that will cushion them from the wrath of the big man. Why do you think the West has never really been bothered about corruption in Africa? It is because corruption is the grease that continuously oils the chains of neo-colonialism in this country, a vision that is shepherded by the very leaders you put in power to protect you. It is 1 year to an electioneering period. You know better, for God's sake. Purpose to do better.